Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Yunche searched all of the corpses and retrieved all of their spatial rings. These higher-ups of the Burning Heaven clan would naturally have quite a good amount of treasures on them. Yunche reaped up a huge amount of rewards, and in Fenmola's spatial ring, he even found a small piece of purple-veined heaven crystal. To have sent me such a great gift, at the very least, your death can be considered as worth it. Yunche picked up that small piece of purple-veined heaven crystal and weighed it, as he quietly spoke with a laugh. However, compared to the mountain of purple-veined divine crystals that Jasmine needed, this small little piece could only be considered as a grain of seed in the ocean. Initially, I had even wanted to try out the profound handle, but I didn't expect that there would actually be no opportunity to use the profound handle at all. Yunche put away Dragon Fault, looked at his two hands, and murmured to himself. My current strength should be enough to rival Qingyu of 16 months ago, right? Qingyu of 16 months ago was at the second level of the Emperor Profound Realm. Strength that could easily defeat Fenmola. The strength of the current Yunche was already comparable to an actual throne. No, it should be more than that. Jasmine quietly said. Evidently, you don't understand the mightiness of Dragon God's marrow. When you obtained the 6 drops of Dragon God's blood back then, your strength had increased by a huge degree. But the marrow is the foundation of bones, and the source of blood. With the Dragon God's marrow, in your body, there will not be merely the existence of just 6 drops of Dragon God's blood. Amidst its endless creation of blood, it'll allow your bloodline to approach closer and closer to the Dragon God's bloodline. From now, even if you don't train at all, your strength will still gradually ascend to higher levels due to the blood. With the amount of Dragon God's marrow the primordial Azure Dragon bestowed to you, given enough time, your body will possess nearly 10% of the Dragon God's blood at the highest limit. Did you not yet notice that you even faintly carry the aura and might of a dragon when you attack now? 10%. Yunche was so shocked that he lost control of his voice right then and there. 6 drops of Dragon God's blood had already caused his body and strength to improve by leaps and bounds. And if 10% of blood in his body was all blood of the Dragon God, then what kind of concept would that be? In terms of bloodline, that would be nearly 10% of a true god's bloodline. HMPH, that's on the premise that you're able to stay alive till then. Jasmine said snappily, do a good count yourself. In these 3 years, just how many times have you nearly died? Don't just be accustomed to throwing yourself into danger all the time, and even more so, do not overestimate your own limits. If you die, everything that you obtained until now will all turn into waste. All right. I understand. Yunche gave a complacent response, however, his expression showed otherwise. In the boundless universe, there exists many heritage left by true gods. There are bloodline heritages, profound art heritages, treasure heritages, but it's actually still my first time seeing an inheritance of the marrow and soul. Seems like, for its own daughter, the primordial Azure Dragon is really putting all his stakes on you. However, if the primordial Azure Dragon really does have a daughter who still exists in the world, then that would be really interesting. Because in this world where true gods are already extinct, if she were to really appear, then that would be a dragon god who possesses a complete bloodline. True gods who have been extinct for countless of years will also once again resurface in the world from this. I really wonder just what kind of abnormalities, or perhaps even great chaos, will be instigated in this world. If there comes a day when I really head to the realm of gods, let's talk about it then. It's a little too ridiculous for the current me to think about this matter. Yunche's face began to turn cold and still. Looking towards the north, he said with a low voice, right now, I only wish that little fairy, and my child, is safe and sound. Otherwise, even Yunche himself didn't know just what kind of crazy things he would do. His figure flashed and headed straight towards the north, leaving behind a trail of dust. 3 days later. The ground under Yunche's feet was already nearing the extreme northern region of Blue Wind Empire. As he moved forward, the incoming wind began to carry an even heavier chilling sensation. The traces of human settlement began to decrease as well, to the point where there was not a single human figure in his line of sight. Even profound beasts and plants were becoming fewer and more sparse. Along the way, Yunche inquired about Frozen Cloud Asgard's position every time he encountered people. The closer he was, the clearer the position of Frozen Cloud Asgard was to him. At this moment, the curtains of the night had descended. Yunche ignited up his phoenix flames for light, and after continuing forward under the stars for half a night, a surge of drowsiness assaulted him. He casually took out a random blanket from the sky poison pearl, set it down, and laid on it. The moment he closed his eyes, he entered the land of his dreams. The late night passed, the dawn came unannounced, and the sky began to hazily brighten. And at this moment, Yunche also opened his eyes. A gentle breeze blew past his ear. Although it was just a gentle breeze, it carried an intense chill. If Yunche had not possessed the evil god's water seed in his body, and did not fear the ice, snow, and severe cold, what he would feel would definitely be heart-piercing and bone-chilling cold. He stood up, and looked towards the distance borrowing the faint light. What was displayed before his eyes was a world that was covered with pure white snow. So this is the snow region of extreme ice. Looking at the world of ice and snow in front of him which seemed to be without bounds, Yunche refreshed his mind. The brain which had just woke up from slumber earlier instantly became clear. He hurriedly drank down a few mouthfuls of dragon blood, before rushing forward impatiently. The moment he stepped into the region of ice and snow, the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped, as though from a hot summer, he instantly stepped into a cold winter without any transitions. If an ordinary person were to arrive at this place, the sudden change in temperature would be enough to cause that person's body to instantly stiffen. Entering the ice pole snow region meant that he was no longer far from frozen cloud Asgard. The bitter cold did not affect Yunche in the slightest. His figure was as swift as the wind, and as fast as lightning, and very quickly disappeared into the snow-white world. The snow region of extreme ice was located at the extreme north of Blue Wind Empire. It was covered in ice and snow for all 4 seasons in a year, and was surrounded by everlasting and unmelting mountains of ice and cliffs of snow. The coldness in this place was to the degree where, unless you were to personally experience it, it would be seemingly impossible to imagine. It was definitely not somewhere a regular human could survive in. However, such an extremely cold land, yet, because of the existence of an influential power, had turned into a sacred place in the eyes of Blue Wind profound practitioners. However, this snow region of extreme ice was completely different compared to the Heavenly Sword mountain range possessed by the Heavenly Sword Villa, as it did not entirely belong to the frozen cloud Asgard. However, after 1,000 years, it had basically turned into a land which was frozen cloud Asgard's exclusive ground. When people mention the snow region of extreme ice, they would immediately think of the frozen cloud Asgard. And, with the frozen cloud Asgard's existence there, even if it were sects that similarly practiced ice attribute profound arts, they wouldn't dare to settle in the ice pole snow region. The reasons why the frozen cloud Asgard had become an existence similar to a sacred land in the eyes of all profound practitioners was not merely because of their strength. The bigger reason was that in the entire Asgard, not a single person there was not a world-class beauty. The number 1 beauties in all of Blue Wind Empire's history had all basically came from frozen cloud Asgard. Even without mentioning their facial features, merely the skin of ice and bones of jade unique to the frozen cloud fairies was already enough to cause all men in the world to be mesmerized, and all women to be envious. It was extremely easy for one to lose their sense of direction within this white-filled world. Plus that the sun and moon could barely be seen all year round here, the sky was an expanse of whiteness and not even a single point of reference could be found. Even Yunche, who had an extremely strong sense of direction, had lost his way several times within it. The current Yunche's mind was filled with concern for Chu Yu-chan and their child who should be already 7 to 8 months old. That feeling of excitement which he never experienced before had caused him to be unable to calm down no matter what he did. And accompanying it was deep fear and anxiety as well. Because he was unable to ascertain whether their child had really been born. He might be currently lying in Chu Yue-chan's embrace, blinking its crystal-like cute and shiny eyes, waiting to meet his father for the first time, or maybe, a year ago, he had already. Yunche strongly shook his head, using all his strength to suppress all the distracting thoughts. Slowing his speed down and following his sharp senses, he walked forward step by step. Little fairy. I wonder if you have already gotten the news of me still being alive. Just when it was exactly the time you needed me the most, yet I was sealed underground. Not only was I unable to shoulder it with you, I instead gave you the heaviest blow and fright. This time, even if you're unwilling, even if the entire frozen cloud Asgard is to disagree, and even if I have to take you by force, I will definitely take you out of frozen cloud Asgard. Yunche silently swore in his heart. He regretted following Chu Yue-chan's wish back then. During the time in the Heavenly Sword Villa, he should have been a little more forceful to her. She had lived in the frozen cloud Asgard for dozens of years, and the mindset that came from the frozen cloud Asgard had already been deeply ingrained in her heart. She was unable to convince and allow herself to willfully enjoy this sort of feeling that couldn't be settled anymore the moment it sprouts. The thing she needed the most was his unyielding. However, as if out of deliberation, he only truly understood it after he found out about her puking out blood and fainting because of the news of his death. In the northwest direction, around 10 kilometers away, there's a clear reaction of profound energy. If there's only a single sect in this entire snow region, then that place should be your target this time. Jasmine, who had slept for 2 consecutive days, woke up at this moment, and very generously pointed out the right direction for Yunche. Yunche instantly adjusted the direction he was facing, and headed towards the northwest. 10 kilometers of the snow plains were very quickly passed under Yunche's feet. An palace with auroras of ice flowing all around, appeared in Yunche's line of sight at this moment. This was a palace that looked as though it had been constructed by the purest ice and snow, and its surroundings reflected a gentle yet ice-cold flow of light, making the entire palace look as though it was immersed in a stretch of snowy mist and the brilliance of ice. Looking from afar, it was like an Asgard hidden within the clouds. Compared to the huge and majestic presence of Heavenly Sword Villa, the entire palace city could only be described with petite, as it only occupied a land of less than 2 kilometers in length. Its size and height could not even match a small branch sect of the Xiao sect, and its atmosphere wasn't very ambitious and frightening either. But instead, it emitted a chill that directly pierced at one's heart and soul, and an aura of holiness which caused people to lose their will of approaching. So this is Frozen Cloud Asgard? Yunche stopped, mumbled softly, then increased his pace and approached it with extreme speed. The closer he neared the frozen cloud Asgard, the colder the temperature was. Mystical flowers and strange stalks of grass which looked as though they were icy blades and sharp snow petals, bloomed competitively around the ice palace, sparkling with an extravagant brilliance like those of crystals and jewelry. They were so beautiful that it could cause one to hold their breath from the sight of it. These strange plants were all nurtured with the purest energy of ice and snow, without being stained by even a hint of the mundane. The air here was unbelievably pure and fresh as well, allowing Yunche's quick-churning heart to even slowly calm down. The flowers and grasses that were overly pure and beautiful made even Yunche to not have the heart to harm them. He carefully went around the plants, and slowly pressed forward. Very quickly, frozen cloud Asgard's crystal-like palace gate appeared right in front of Yunche. Glows of ice flowed and circled on the palace door, as it faintly flashed with mystical markings, as though some special profound formation was sealed within. Yet as he walked to this point, he still did not see any single human figure from the frozen cloud Asgard. The entire ice palace was cold and silent, as though there was not even a single person present. Senior Sister had said that frozen cloud Asgard had begun its seclusion 16 months ago, Yunche deeply murmured, and he continued to walk forward. At this moment, Jasmine suddenly spoke out, "There's an attack profound formation in front. However, with your current strength, if you wish to forcefully break through it, it's not able to stop you either." With Jasmine's warning, Yunche instantly sensed that on the snowy ground less than 10 steps ahead from him, strands of profound energy ripples could be felt. His brows slightly moved, and continued to walk forward. Just as he took the 7th step, a glow of ice was suddenly released from the ground in front of him, and an ice lotus-shaped profound formation which was 30 meters wide bloomed. Above the profound formation, 18 huge words were emitting an ice-cold air of deterrence. "Frozen cloud in seclusion, no guests are welcome. If one were to forcefully breach, then face the consequences." This was frozen cloud Asgard's great Asgard defending formation. As a profound formation of the most excellent sect in the Empire, one could imagine its tremendous might. Just by simply getting a feel of its aura, Yunche was certain that even the most high-leveled practitioners of the Sky Profound Realm wouldn't be able to barge past it. And even if it was someone in the Emperor Profound Realm, it would also be extremely difficult to breach through. While, spanning the entire of Imperial City, the total number of practitioners in the Emperor Profound Realm could be counted with both hands. Yunche grabbed Dragonfolt's sword and stomped forward without hesitation. In a split second, a wave of aura that chilled both the heart and bone shrouded Yunche completely. The ice-blue-colored profound formation quickly began spinning, and countless specks of tiny icicles rose from below, and pierced over like a storm. Yunche leapt up and constructed a profound energy barrier as phoenix flames instantly ignited from his entire body. He possessed the evil god's water seed, and water-attributed energy wouldn't be able to harm him in the first place. Moreover, the energy contained within these icicles was interlinked with the energy of the frozen cloud arts, so even if these icicles were to come into direct contact with Yunche's body, it would be difficult to harm him. And even more so, upon contact with the phoenix's flames, they had already melted into water droplets right away and even evaporated into vapor. Momentarily, dense, sizzling sounds came from Yunche's body, as the vapor around him tumbled. Bringing with him the water vapor around his body, he swiftly rushed forward, straight towards the palace gate. Clink! Ice-cold rays of light flashed before Yunche, and an ice lotus of 7 meters wide bloomed on the ground, before rising steeply and rushed towards Yunche head-on. The frighteningly cold aura it carried even froze over all the icicles that were being shot from below. Yunche's brows twitched, and dragon bolt smashed out straight onto the heart of the approaching ice lotus. Bang! The gigantic ice lotus exploded in an instant, and the shattered ice shards filled the sky. When these icicles fell onto Yunche, they also quickly melted. The enormous might contained by this ice lotus was enough to make even an peerless strong expert like Fenmoli to be flustered. Yet under Yunche's sword, it had exploded instantly. However, how could the protective profound troops of the frozen Cloudus Guard be so simple? Before Yunche was able to move his feet, a cold light from the surroundings reappeared. From behind, to the left, right, from a total of 8 different directions, 8 more ice lotuses that did not seem to pale in comparison in both power and size to that ice lotus from before blossomed simultaneously. After which, the 8 then joined to form a huge ice lotus formation, attacking Yunche in unison. Yunche's gaze flashed icy cold, his profound energy surging up violently and explosively, sealing cloud-locking sun. Bang! 8 ice lotuses all smashed into Yunche, layer by layer. That wave of enormous power could almost be comparable to 8,000-meter-tall ice mountains. And the cold aura they concentrated within was more so enough to freeze an entire volcano over. Sealing cloud-locking sun's protective screen had been impacted to the point of distorting, yet it still did not break, and forcefully withstood the frightening power of 8 ice lotuses. At this very moment, the phoenix blood within Yunche also burst into life with a manic frenzy. Star-scorching demon lotus. Whoosh! A fire lotus that was a few dozen times bigger than the ice lotus blossomed from Yunche's body, swallowing all 8 of the ice lotuses. Following Yunche's continuous and explosive increased strength, the might of the star-scorching demon lotus could not be compared to what it had been in the past. Even the ice lotuses that contained enormous amounts of cold energy and icy might could only last for less than 5 breaths of time in the phoenix flames, before quickly melting and turning into wisps of rising vapor. Fire and water counters each other. What the phoenix flame burned wasn't merely the 8 ice lotuses, but also the entire frozen cloud formation. The light from the entire frozen cloud great formation began growing chaotic, and the speed of its rotation also fell by a large extent. Yunche raised his sword with both hands, and the shadow of a wolf appeared behind him. With a great roar, Skywolf / blasted forward. Boom 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 boom. Under the long howl of the Skywolf, a deep ditch of 7 meters wide and 100 meters long opened up in the ground that held the profound formation. The entire frozen cloud great formation was directly split into 2 halves straight from the center. All the fire on Yunche extinguished, and his figure transformed into a swift shadow. With just a few leaps, he had already rushed past the frozen cloud great formation's area, and stood before the main entrance to the frozen Cloudus Guard. And at this time, the ice crystal gate that had been shut tightly suddenly opened. Together with a woman's cold and angry voice, a ray of cold sword light pierced straight at Yunche's chest. Who goes there, to actually dare to barge into my frozen Cloudus Guard? The sword light that came toward him was incomparably chilling, but it was of no threat to Yunche at all. With a casual swing of his arms, Dragon Bolt racked up an enormous gust of heavy sword wind storm. Before the tip of the woman's sword could even come within 7 meters of Yunche, she was already thrown back by the violent heavy sword storm, landing back at the main entrance with a flip. On her beautiful jade-like face, which was as cold as snow, the expression of utter shock was apparent. To be able to get through the frozen Cloudus Guard's protective spell, the trespasser must have extremely great might. Therefore, Chuyueli had undertaken this task and struck out personally. However, she had not expected that the opponent's power would actually be at such a frightening level, to actually be able to knock her away with just the sword's wind. The very moment the sword wind touched her, she felt as if a tremendous hammer had crashed onto her chest. Upon clearly seeing the face of the intruder, the look of shock on her face instantly magnified. Yunche. You're not dead? You're actually not dead. The frozen Cloudus Guard's gate was right in front of his eyes, and he only needed a few steps to enter. Yunche suppressed down the turmoil in his heart, and spoke as he looked at Chuyueli. That's right, I am not dead. Let me in, I want to see Chuyu-chan. Frozen Cloudus Guard had always been in closed state, separated from the world, So even though Yun-Che had already escaped from under the sword management terrace for many days and even did something that shook the world, the frozen cloud Asgard hadn't known about Yun-Che still being alive until today. Whether it was his survival or the shocking strength he had shown earlier, they all made Chu-Yueli extremely shocked in her heart. And as she heard him mention the words, Chu-Yu-chan, her heartstrings was instantly stabbed with pain. You actually still have the face to find sister. If it's not for you, how could she have broken the Asgard rules, and become laughed at by the entire world? And if not for you, how would she be forced to discard her profound arts and become exiled from the frozen cloud Asgard forever? It's all because of you. Chu-Yueli's words was as if a thunder had sounded beside Yun-Che's ears. On the way here, he had been accompanied by fear at every single moment, afraid of hearing the news that he was most unwilling to hear. But after coming to the frozen cloud Asgard, the first sentence he heard about Chu-Yu-chan was already a thunderbolt out of the blue. Yun-Che's rage, as if gasoline that has touched a spark, instantly started to crazily and uncontrollably burn. He rushed up with a whoosh, grabbed up Chu-Yueli's collar at once, and roared with a distorted, ferocious face, "What did you say? What did you say just now? Say it again. Say it again." The moment that Yun-Che's fury exploded, Chu-Yueli felt a sense of suffocation in her chest, and her entire body was tightly suppressed by a heavy imposing aura. The speed that Yun-Che rushed toward her was not too fast, but she didn't even have the time to move at all before her collar was already caught by him. That face which distorted under extreme fury was also extremely close to her charming face. Under shock and anger, Chu-Yueli subconsciously threw out a palm strike, and heavily smashed onto Yun-Che's chest. Yun-Che's body was instantly blasted away, and consecutively retreated 5 or 6 steps, while the entirety of Chu-Yueli's being fell into a dumbfounded state. That strike she sent out earlier was almost subconsciously done under anger, and at least used 70% of her force. It was enough to crack open a short mountain from within, yet when it hit Yun-Che, it actually only blasted him back a few steps. Looking at his complexion, there was basically not even a hint of being injured. From the time he fell at Heavenly Sword Villa, 16 months has already passed. Within these 16 months, just what had happened to him? Not only did he come back alive, his strength actually also grew by such a terrifying extent. You said that Chu-Yu-chan had been crippled of her profound art and thrown out of the frozen cloud Asgard. Is that true? Yun-Che gaze ruthlessly locked onto Chu-Yueli, as he roared with his voice cracking. Right after, he suddenly muttered to himself, "She's the head of the frozen cloud 7 fairies. Apart from the secluded senior of the frozen cloud Asgard, her position is only second to the Asgard mistress. The only person who can do this to her would be the frozen cloud Asgard's Asgard mistress. Only the Asgard mistress." Before the ranking tournament, on the way to the Heavenly Sword Villa, he remembered that King Yu had told him that the current Asgard mistress of the frozen cloud Asgard was Gong Yuxian, who had already stepped into the Emperor Profound Realm 40 years ago, and is currently reigning at the ultimate pinnacle level of the strongest practitioners. Yun-Che raised his head suddenly. Within his eyes, there was as if 2 blood-red balls of fire burning within his eyes. Rushing towards the frozen cloud Asgard, he roared loudly like a ferocious wolf, "Gong Yuxian! Get out right this moment! Gong Yuxian, get out here right now! Right now! Or else, I will throw your frozen cloud Asgard upside down, and even fowls and dogs wouldn't rest in peace. Get out here right now!" Yun-Che's enraged roar was carried by profound strength, and spread very far, reaching into every corner of the frozen cloud Asgard. Standing before the main entrance of the frozen cloud Asgard and roaring for the Asgard mistress to get out here right now, Yun-Che was absolutely the first in all history. Even if it were beings of the pinnacle level like Xiao Juetian and Fen Duanhui, they would still definitely retract all of their arrogant air when they arrive at the frozen cloud Asgard's territory, and keep from causing any offense as much as possible. Yun-Che was not someone who could become easily enraged. Oftentimes, he would appear angry on the surface, yet his mind would be incomparably calm. But this time, his anger crazily burned, and it could not be controlled no matter what, because this matter was related to Chu-Yu-chan, and also their child. Unless he had severed all of his emotions, and extinguished his soul, there was no way he could become calm. Yun-Che's snarl had undoubtedly ignited the ire of all who were in the frozen cloud Asgard. The frozen cloud Asgard was a sacred land that had stood for thousands of years, and was a place no one dared to provoke. Today, their Asgard mistress was actually being taunted right in their own territory. Momentarily, the originally calm and empty frozen cloud Asgard shone flashed with icy glow from all directions, and all of the frozen cloud disciples appeared in the snow, gathering towards the palace gate. From above the palace gate, 5 silhouettes clothed in white descended simultaneously. Each of them brought a wave of might that was enough to freeze the land. When they landed, ice spirits floated in the surroundings, and snow fluttered in the wind. Their appearances were pitilessly beautiful, as if they were goddesses that descended to the mortal world, as their ethereal beauty made the entire world to lose its colors. Other than Xie Qingyu, the 6 of the Frozen Cloud 7 fairies were Murong Qinxue, who was ranked 2nd, Jun Lianxie, who was ranked 3rd, Mu Lanyi, who was 4th, Chu Yueli, who was 5th, and Feng Hanyu, the 6th, as well as Feng Hanxue, who was 7th. All 6 had appeared in front of Yunche. Facing Yunche, who looked to be less than 20 years of age, all of their faces were all painted with surprise. But seeing the horrifying ditch behind him and the frozen cloud great formation which had been wrecked to an unrecognizable extent, all of their surprise was replaced by deep shock. The appearance of the 6 from the Frozen Cloud 7 fairies, without even taking into account their fame and prestige, just by their proud and lofty disposition as well as their matchless beauty, the picture they made was already enough to dazzle any man and make their soul fly out. However, it was as if Yunche didn't even see this beautiful scenery. His pair of eyes were filled with deep anger and hatred. Looking toward the front, he said with an overcast voice, "Not coming out? Then I'll have to pull you out myself." During his low mumbling, Yunche grabbed Dragon Fault and rushed straight towards the palace door like an angered cheetah. "Stop him!" Chu Yueli turned pale with fright. With a wave of her ice sword, an ice lotus blossomed from the tip of her sword, and pierced toward Yunche's chest. From above, along with Chu Yueli's shocked cry, the other 5 frozen cloud fairies attacked in unison, and a large number of ice lotuses bloomed at once. The cold wind howled, and the surroundings were frozen over in an instant. Scram! Yunche clenched his teeth, and with a furious howl, he ruthlessly smashed down Dragon Fault. The phoenix's flame and the evil god's profound energy were released from the sword without holding back in the slightest, as the phoenix's and dragon's cry shook one's heart and soul. Rumble! The ground burst apart, and the frozen cloud palace gate, which possessed a powerful defensive profound formation and had stood its ground for thousands of years, was directly smashed into pieces, becoming mere useless rubble. The strong storm of energy swept away everything within 300 meters in radius, and the ice and snow that would never thaw in 10,000 years was swept up, filling the entire sky. While all of the Frozen Cloud 6 fairies, who had strength to shock the entire world, were blown far away with a groan under the might of this single strike by Yunche, just like snow-white butterflies being swept away by a storm. The Frozen Cloud Asgard's disciples had all rushed over by then, and the first thing they saw was the scene of their palace gate exploding and the Frozen Cloud 6 fairies all being thrown away in one sword strike. In that instant, all their lips fell agape and could not be closed for a long while. Confusion and terror filled their eyes, because they had just witnessed the hardest to believe scenery in this world. After blowing away the defense that the Frozen Cloud 6 fairies simultaneously constructed with a single sword strike, Yunche clenched his teeth and formally stepped into the Frozen Cloud Asgard with rage burning up within him. At this moment, a furious voice descended from above, "Insolent one! You actually dare to barge into my frozen Asgard and destroy my palace gate? Unforgivable!" A gust of bone-chilling blizzard arrived, howling as it unyieldingly stopped Yunche's advancing body. Yunche gave a loud roar, and with a swing of his heavy sword, the blizzard wave was blown away, scattering instantly. After which, he smashed straight at the figure that was rapidly descending from the skies. The person before him looked to be 40 or 50 years old, and a wave of enormously oppressive might emanated from her. Her mightiness of her strength was above Fen Duanhuan, above Xiao Juetian, and even above Ling Yifeng. She was the strongest opponent Yunche had ever encountered to date in the Blue Wind Empire. An peerless strong being who had stayed in the Emperor Profound Realm for 40 whole years. And this person could only be the mistress of the Frozen Cloud Asgard. Gong Yuxian. Yunche's fury that was already surging grew even more intense. With flash of his body, 4 figures appeared in mid-air, swung out 4 phoenix breaks that were charged with anger at the same time, as they mercilessly blasted straight for Gong Yuxian, whose might stood proud in the world, that even the Emperor would have to act utmost courteous to her in dread, the Frozen Cloud Asgard's mistress. Gong Yuxian's eyebrows furrowed tight, and with a wave of her arm, a snow-white long ribbon danced the air as it floated, striking all 4 phoenix breaks and scattering them. With another wave of her arm, the snow-white long ribbon was knitted into the shape of a snowflake in the midst of its dance. Carrying a might that could shake the heavens and the cold of an icy world, it greeted straight for Yunche's heavy sword. Bang! 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 The power of the Emperor Profound Realm exploded in the collisions, and even shook up the entirety of the frozen cloud Asgard as it faint shuddered. 3 enormous overlapping holes broke open on the ground, and even the space above had almost collapsed under distortion. Frozen cloud Asgard disciples who were relatively closer were directly flung away by the residual wave of profound energy, letting out panicked, yet tender and sweet-sounding cries. Yunche landed on the ground with a flip, all the blood and air in his body tumbled. Right before him, Gong Yuxian landed slowly. Shock was written clearly across her face. Her gaze paused on Yunche's face for a short while, and then swept past to the dragon fault in his hands. A cold light came from her solemn eyes. To actually have such strength at such a young age, and also possesses an Emperor Profound sword as well. Could it be that you are a descendant of a certain sacred ground? Gong Yuxian was such a high-level being that no one would dare to not answer a question from her. Yet Yunche continued to turn a deaf ear. His eyes were as if the bloodshot ones of cruel wolves, and glared at her as he spoke in a raspy voice. Gong Yuxian. Xu Yuechan's profound art being crippled, and was also chased out of the frozen Asgard. Is that true? Speak. Mistress, he is Yunche. He didn't die? Chu Yueli shouted. Amongst all the people present, only she had seen Yunche before. Yunche. The tip of Gong Yuxian's brow moved. All the frozen cloud Asgard's disciples' faces revealed shock and complicated expressions as well. So he was Yunche? The one who had snatched the championship of the ranking tournament with a profound strength of the true profound realm, who was also Xie Qingyue's husband, as well as the one who made Chu Yuchan pregnant, and shook up the entire Blue Wind Empire, then unexpectedly fell at the Heavenly Sword Villa, that Yunche. Obtaining the title of champion in the ranking tournaments at 17 years old, a true profound realm that matched Earth Profound Realm. With accomplishments like these, it was enough to look over the Blue Wind Empire with pride, and was also qualified enough let Gong Yuxian pay him attention. But after those few moves that Gong Yuxian had just exchanged with Yunche, her heart could be said to have stirred up a stormy sea. Her profound strength was at the 3rd level of the Emperor Profound Realm, and yet she did not gain the slightest bit of advantage over Yunche. Every time that Emperor Profound Heavy Sword was swung, its terrifying might was even enough to make her feel like her chest was being pressed by a huge rock, making her unable to breathe at all. His true strength is far more than 100 times greater than what was spoken in the rumors. Perhaps even compared to current Xie Qingyu, he isn't the slightest bit weaker. This Yunche can be considered an pitilessly talented being. It's no wonder why even Chu Yuchan had been moved by him. So you are Yunche? Gong Yuxian was both surprised and furious. The frozen cloud Asgard's 1,000 years of pristine reputation had been sullied, was precisely because of him, and being forced to shut the palace gate in seclusion, was also because of him. If Yunche hadn't already fell earlier, she would have longed to leave the frozen Asgard to kill him herself. Her brow sunk, as she said, so you're actually still alive? And you have the gall to come up to my frozen cloud Asgard to condemn me? You caused Yuchen to violate the sectoral rules and destroyed my frozen Asgard's 1,000 years of reputation. Bullshit. Yunche voiced angrily, what does your dog shit sectoral rules have to do with me? How am I in any way related to your 1,000 years of pristine reputation? In my eyes, your sectoral rules are practically the most dehumanizing chains in this world. And your so-called 1,000 years of pristine reputation is even more of an enormous joke. While I and Chu Yuchen loved each other, took on hardships together, went through life and death together. The matters between the two of us, even the Emperor of the Heavens have no control over them. What right do you have to cripple her profound art and chase her out of your sect? Insolence. Gong Yuxian raged, and spoke as she held back her emotions. Yuchan is the direct disciple of mine whom I am proudest of. I treat her just like my own daughter, and all the frozen cloud arts she has learned have been taught by me. Even though I hate that she has caused the sect's reputation to become tainted, and wished so much to personally destroy that vile spawn in her womb, but how can I have the heart to cripple her profound arts and throw her out of the Asgard? The frozen cloud arts is a supreme profound art of the ice attribute. It freezes the heart and chills the body. If a woman who trains in the frozen cloud arts becomes pregnant, the child in her womb would be frozen to death in less than 2 months. This place is an area of perpetual snow and ice. The cold energy is extremely heavy, and therefore, it is the most suitable place to train in the frozen cloud arts. But living under such heavy cold energy for too long would similarly be fatal to the fetus. Yuchan, for you, and for that vile spawn you left in her body, had discarded her own profound arts on the spot and begged me on her knees to let her leave the frozen cloud Asgard. Yunche's mind experienced a loud crash, and instantly became a stretch of white. And in that white world, a portrayal of little fairy who was usually cold as profound ice, resolutely crippling her own profound arts for the sake of their child, and kneeling in front of Gong Yuxian while begging with tears, was slowly painted. Previously, although he had liked Chu Yuchan and was infatuated with her pure and cold temperament and sensation, never did he feel like he had owed her anything. Even though she had saved him, however, in the Dragon Spirit training ground, he had also battled tooth and nail to protect her. Even regarding them becoming one, it was also done to save her life. But at this moment, he clearly knew that in his entire life, he would never be able to forget Chu Yuchan. In this entire life, he could not ever afford to let that infatuated heart, even more tenacious and transparent than a diamond below that facade, as lofty and prideful as a snow lotus, down. Yun Che's face started to twitch. Following which, he laughed. His laugh was tinged with a little sadness and a little cold mockery. His voice was low, but the anger in it had not lessened in the slightest. Gong Yuxian, let me ask you. Back then, did you really not have any method of saving the child in her, as well as in her profound art, without making her leave the frozen cloud as guard? Gong Yuxian's expression changed. Facing Yun Che's gaze, which was cold as ice, the words that was about to exit her mouth, yet couldn't leave her lips for a long while. Yun Che spoke in a somber tone. Had you used purple-veined heavenly crystal to temporarily seal her profound veins, and protected the child in her womb the same way, then no matter the cold energy of the frozen cloud arts, or the cold energy, it would be absolutely impossible for the child to be harmed. Purple-veined heavenly crystal is indeed incomparably valuable, but as a sect that has been standing for 1,000 years, it's absolutely impossible to not be able to take out enough purple-veined heavenly crystal. Gong Yuxian, you've been living for 100 years, and are at the pinnacle of the Blue Wind Imperial City's practicing world, so don't tell me you did not know of such a method. Yun Che's words had hit the nail straight on her head. Her face was somber, but when facing Yun Che's angry eyes, she was unable to say anything. Mistress, is this true? Chu Yueli questioned. And when she spoke, her hands tightened unconsciously. Sigh? Gong Yuxian let out a long sigh and said, back then, Chu Yuqian had suddenly discarded her profound arts herself. There simply wasn't enough time for me to stop her. Bullshit. Yun Che's furious voice cut Gong Yuxian short. Even if she had suddenly crippled her profound arts, and you weren't able to stop her in time, then why did you allow her to leave the frozen cloud as guard? Without profound arts, how would she protect herself? And with her profound arts crippled, her body would definitely be extremely weak for a long period of time, moreover that she was pregnant. If you had really cared for her, and saw her as your own daughter, you ought to have kept her in the frozen cloud as guard. With the purple-veined heavenly crystal to block out the cold energy, and the protection of your frozen guard, she would definitely have been safe and sound until the child had been born. Yet you still chose to throw her out. All your excuses are just bull. What you really minded was simply just your so-called 1,000 years of pristine reputation. Because only exiling her from the frozen cloud Asgard, would you be able to say that the sanctity of the Asgard had been preserved. For your so-called pristine reputation, everything else, even your so-called daughter, could decisively be thrown away. Nonsense. Gong Yuxian was sullen, while Yuchen discarded her own profound arts. A profound strength is still within her. With her profound strength of the Emperor Profound Realm, in the entire Blue Wind Empire, just how many could even harm her? Yun Che took up his dragon fault. As a berserking aura released from his body, I, Yun Che, am a person who will definitely repay debts of grace, but also grudge alike. If your frozen cloud Asgard had treated Chu Yuchen kindly, kept her in the Asgard and protected her as she gave birth to our child, I would have definitely become eternally grateful to your frozen cloud Asgard. Even if I had to sell my life for the sake of your frozen Asgard, I would not have batted an eyelid. But regretfully, you have made a decision that I can't help but resent. Gong Yuxian, you'd best pray that on the day I find her, she and our child are both safe and sound, or else I'll for certain take your life even if you were the Queen Mother of the Heavens. Each and every of Yun Che's words was terribly pressing, and Gong Yuxian was also slowly losing control over the fury that she had fought to keep suppressed. She spoke with a heavy voice, regarding Yuchen, even though the punishment she had received was definitely not unjust, it is true that my handling of it had left much to be desired in terms of sensibility. But this cannot become a reason for you to cause a ruckus in my frozen cloud Asgard. What's more, you're the one who owes my frozen cloud Asgard first. My frozen cloud Asgard dates back for thousands of years, and nobody has ever dared to be so impudent. If you don't give me a satisfactory account for what happened today, then don't even think of leaving. Account for it? Yun Che laughed coldly. The one who should be giving an account for this is you, not me. I don't have any intentions of leaving now at all, either. Because I have yet to let you taste the repercussions of angering me. The profound energy from Yunche exploded suddenly, causing the ice and snow that had just landed to be blown up to the air once again, filling the entire sky. Swinging up the dragon fault, an overlord's fury directly blasted toward Gong Yuxian's face. The screaming wind and dragon cry that seemed as if it came from above the heavens resounded through the entire frozen cloud Asgard. Gong Yuxian wrinkled her brows at the berserkness and oppressive might of the strike as her body dropped down. When she landed on the ground, the long ribbon fluttered, and the magnificent ice around her dazzled. Amidst the whirling snow that filled the air, an ice lotus blossomed, towering toward the sky. Zap! With a sound similar to the exploding sound of thunder, the berserk energy burst out like a violently surging tsunami. Even the ice beneath was roughly lifted up, and covered the whole sky within the range of vision. Yunche and Gong Yuxian fell back at the same time. All the surrounding ice and snow within nearly 1,000 meters from the place they were standing had turned into extremely minute powder. There was no one in the Blue Wind Empire who would dare to question Gong Yuxian's strength. However, the momentary battle between Yunche and Gong Yuxian actually ended without either gaining an advantage over the other. This made all the Frozen Cloud disciples extremely shocked. But the momentary battle further aroused Yunche and Gong Yuxian's fury. After the two stayed still for a while, Yunche let out a wild roar as he waved the dragon fault. His body and sword was burning with the incomparably blazing phoenix flame. Phoenix flame burned the sky as ice and snow covered the sun. Along with an splitting explosion sound, the sword shadow and the tip of the ribbon continuously clashed together. It even produced terrible sounds like that of lightning and thunder. Gong Yuxian's figure floated and wandered within the ice, snow, and phoenix flame like a fantastic figure. This was the absolute movement skill of the Frozen Cloud Asgard, Frozen Snow Dance Steps. Yunche had seen it once when battling with Xie Qingyu in the ranking tournament. When Xie Qingyu used Frozen Snow Dance Steps, her posture was so outstandingly graceful and extraordinary that she looked very much like a fairy. It was unimaginably beautiful and could have easily confused a person's sight. However, as for Gong Yuxian, her steps were so ghostly that her movements were completely unpredictable. Yunche used Star God's Broken Shadow to deal with it. Even if it was only the third stage of the Star God's Broken Shadow, it was in no way inferior to Gong Yuxian's 8th-stage Frozen Snow Dance Steps. When comparing the two movement skills, the Frozen Snow Dance Steps, which she had trained in for nearly her whole life, was actually unable to gain the upper hand in the slightest. A virtual image of an ice lotus began to blossom behind Gong Yuxian's back, and gradually became substantial. As she released her move, 100 streaks of ice phoenix mirages were discharged with every wave of the ribbon. In the beginning of her battle with Yunche, she didn't really use her whole strength, but when she discovered that she was unable to do anything to him, she began to increase the amount of profound power she was using little by little. However, she was shocked to find that with every bit of increase in her profound power, the power of her opponent was also increasing bit by bit, and he wasn't suppressed at all by her during the entire battle. Just when her move switched from Frozen Dance to Ice Phoenix's dance, his heavy sword began to let out a soul-shuddering dragon's cry, and minced all the ice phoenixes. In the blink of an eye, both of them had already exchanged more than 100 blows, yet neither of them was able to do anything to the other. Both of them seemed to evenly match each other in strength. However, among the two, one had been famous for dozens of years, and her might was known to everyone in the world. It was the Frozen Cloud Asgard mistress whom everyone was afraid of. But on the other side, it was just a 19-year-old young man. All the disciples of the Frozen Cloud Asgard lost their voices in endless shock. After all, this battle between the two completely overturned their perceptions. Frozen Heaven Coffin. As both of them got separated by some distance after their frantic collision, Gong Yuxian stabilized her body and brought her hands together before Yunche could make his move. Along with successive, cracking sounds, the place around Yunche rapidly took shape of a crystalline ice coffin. The ice coffin wasn't thick at all, but it was formed by the power of incomparably high-density frozen cloud. Once someone was enclosed inside that ice coffin, even if it was an opponent of the same level as her, it would be impossible for them to break out of it in a short amount of time. After successfully sealing off Yunche, Gong Yuxian immediately let out a sigh of relief, and said in a stern voice, "With your current age and strength, you are comparable with the descendants of the sacred grounds. You're almost as strong as our Frozen Cloud Asgard's Xie Qingyu. Truly, I never thought that I'd be destroying such a genius from the Blue Wind Empire with my own hands. However, there's no way I could forgive a person like you who has offended my Frozen Cloud Asgard. Yunche turned a deaf ear to her and smashed on the ice coffin, which produced a vibrating bang sound. Gong Yuxian said in a cold voice, "This is the strongest sealing skill of my frozen cloud Asgard, frozen heaven coffin. Once a person is sealed within it, it'd be absolutely impossible for them to get out in a short amount of tea." Along with a cracking sound, long cracks quickly spread around the entire surface of the ice coffin. This immediately caused Gong Yuxian to stop talking halfway through the sentence, and her face showed a terrified expression. With a sneer on his face, Yunche's second strike suddenly smashed down on the ice coffin again. Falling moon, sinking star. Bang! The frozen heaven coffin immediately burst open into pieces with an exploding sound. Amidst the countless pieces of ice crystals that filled the whole sky, Yunche's silhouette moved with such intensity as if tearing open the space itself, and rushed over to Gong Yuxian with the demeanor of a ghost. Subsequently, the image of a blue wolf loftily emerged behind his back. Sky Wolf. Slash! The incomparably tenacious frozen heaven coffin was actually smashed in 2 blows from Yunche. Under the huge shock, Gong Yuxian found herself absent-minded for a moment. Then, her chest was struck by the wolf's exceedingly heavy blow that carried enough might to destroy a mountain. PFF. The dreadfulness of the wolf silhouette's power far exceeded Gong Yuxian's expectation. All of her internal organs were dislocated in a very short time, and her entire body was dyed in blood. As blood sprayed out from her mouth, she staggered continuously, moving more than 10 steps backwards. A ghastly streak of blood could be seen at the corner of her mouth. Mistress! Mistress! The 6 fairies of the frozen cloud, who had turned pale with fright, quickly dashed over to Gong Yuxian, and stood before her in a guarding posture. The ice spirits surrounding their bodies moved chaotically as coldness bore through their hearts. However, what covered them even more was the extreme shock that didn't show any signs of disappearing. Although he used a sneak attack, the fact remained that Yunche was able to injure Gong Yuxian. His battle strength completely broke the very foundation of their imaginations and perceptions. It was at least as strong as someone in the Emperor Profound realm. It was simply impossible to imagine the future accomplishments of someone like him who was already so strong even before turning 20. Yunche didn't continue with his attacks and withdrew his sword force in front of every frozen cloud disciple's line of sight. Even Dragon Fault had vanished without a trace from his hands. Gong Yuxian, there were already no signs of anger in Yunche's expression and eyes. A stillness that absolutely shouldn't be appearing on a person of his age had fully replaced it. It was as if he wasn't facing frozen cloud Asgard's mistress, but a criminal who needed to be tried. "You simply can't understand my anger, just as I can't understand the significance of the frozen cloud Asgard's rules and clean reputation to you. Everything that you did to Yuchan may not be wrong at all for someone in your position, but as for me, to make her leave to some other place where she might find herself in a risky situation when she was pregnant is an inexcusable mistake. You owe me this strike." Gong Yuxian slowly suppressed her internal injuries, and sternly said, "Your talent may be astonishing and exceptional, but you're extremely conceited, and your heart and mind are even more selfish and narrow. Yuchan was the last disciple that I personally taught after myself bringing her back to frozen cloud Asgard back then. I spent the majority of the latter half of my life, heart and blood on raising her, which eventually let her become famous all around the world as the Fairy of Frozen Beauty. So regardless of her violating the sect rules, staining frozen Asgard's clean reputation, and even self-abolishing her profound art, I wouldn't have owed her in the least even if I abolished her with my own hands for no reason, and expelled her from our frozen Asgard. As for you, HMPH, you sullied my frozen Asgard's disciple, and also defiled my frozen Asgard's 1,000 years long of pristine reputation. As such, it wouldn't be too much even if I were to personally kill you. So why would I feel the need to protect your and Yuechan's vile spawn? Your questions and violent criticism have to be the biggest joke in the world." Yunche slowly raised his eyebrows and coldly said, "You say you don't owe Chu Yuchen anything? Heh, no. You do owe her. You owe her too much. If you hadn't met her back then, and brought her to the frozen cloud Asgard, she could also have the life of a normal girl. With her beauty that can overturn the world, she could have easily found a suitable man to accompany her throughout her life, and enjoyed the most intact emotions as well as the most perfect life. But you, aside from making her obtain a strong power, what else did you give to her? Was she ever able to laugh, cry, or be happy even once? She spent her every day under this frozen sky and snowy land, completely absorbed in practicing the frozen cloud arts. Fettered by the rules of your sect, there was no way for her to touch the emotions she originally possessed as a woman. What you did for her was to almost make a living person like her into an ice sculpture with completely frozen emotions. You nearly destroyed her entire life. Although she and I had been acquaintances for a brief period of time, she willingly abandoned her life of several decades she had in frozen cloud Asgard for me. It was during the short time that I let her change back to a true woman, no longer an emotionless ice sculpture sealed by the frozen cloud anymore. Yunche's voice gradually became lonely. Your frozen cloud Asgard's tradition of collecting extremely talented and beautiful girls every year from all over the place, and bringing them into frozen Asgard, is the same as fettering them for the rest of their life. In order to continue your frozen Asgard's foundation, you've ruined the intact fates that many of the extremely outstanding girls brought to this place were supposed to enjoy. Even if I call the sect rules of your frozen cloud Asgard as the world's most savage shackles, I wouldn't be accusing you wrongly even a bit. The frozen cloud Asgard is an existence akin to the sacred grounds in the hearts of countless people, but in my eyes, it's nothing more than a tomb of the living dead which shouldn't exist in this world. You, shut your mouth. Gong Yuxian let out a loud roar, and her face twitched for a second. That's right, it actually twitched. Even Yunche didn't think that his speech would make her give such a huge reaction. However, all the girls of the frozen cloud were only staring blankly, as no one had brought up such a topic as Yunche did in front of them before. The kind of words he spoke not only vilified their sect but also insulted it, so they should have been angry, and rejected the validity of his accuses. But each and every word he said penetrated deep inside the silent depths of their souls like a spell, and suddenly set their emotions, that were impossible to remain completely faded out for eternity, into motion. Yunche faintly glanced at Gong Yuxian and continued, You say I'm a selfish person, and I completely agree with your words, as I'm originally an extremely selfish person. If I have to make a choice between the lives of countless innocent people who are unrelated to me and Chu Yuechan's life, I would immediately kill those countless innocent people without any hesitation at all. That's how selfish I am. For Chu Yuechan, I can bear any nightmare or sin, but for you, and the frozen cloud Asgard, it's simply impossible to ever feel such feelings. Gong Yuxian. Yunche turned around, and indifferently said, Although I resent you for expelling Chu Yuechan from the frozen cloud Asgard, but I simultaneously feel glad about it. Because when I find her, she would completely belong to me, for there would be no relation between your frozen cloud Asgard and Chu Yuechan anymore. She wouldn't need to be restrained and burdened by your heavy fetters that only serve to shackle one's heart. After he finished speaking, Yunche lifted his leg and slowly walked toward the outside of the palace gate. Don't block his path. Gong Yuxian reached out with her hands, grabbing Murong Qinxue and Zhun Lianjie who were thinking of chasing after him, and said with a pale face, You are not his opponent. Let him go. When she finished talking, her body, that shouldn't have suffered any great internal injury, slowly sank down on the ground, as if she had exhausted all her strength. Both her eyes lost spirit, and she couldn't even hear the shouts of surprise near her ears. Within her mind, the figure of a young man emerged as if she was in a dream. It was the person who had thawed her frozen and sealed heart with his thoroughly genuine feelings, and then she experienced with him all the happiness that she never felt before in the frozen cloud Asgard. However, she wasn't as courageous as Chu Yuechan, and stepped back from the relationship. She broke her ties with him, and they never saw each other again. Afterwards, she found his ice-cold corpse that was still releasing an aura of sorrow at the extreme border of the snow region of extreme ice, where they had met for the first time. It had already been 80 years since then. The thing that should have been a beautiful dream, had actually become the most heart-rending nightmare for her. After countless stings of pain she felt over the period of a long time, she believed that her soul had already completely frozen over and wouldn't waver anymore. What Yunche said suddenly awakened the nightmare that she had always continuously tried to forget with all her heart, and made her heart throb. Without anyone chasing after him, Yunche walked away from the frozen cloud Asgard. Walking amidst the frozen sky and snowy land, he looked at the vast expanse of whiteness that dyed the snow region of extreme ice, feeling indecisive and helpless for the first time within his heart. Little fairy, where are you? Just where did you go? What am I supposed to do to find you? Jasmine could clearly sense his mental state, and said indifferently, Perhaps you don't need to deliberately seek her. Given your current influence, the news that you are alive would rapidly spread, and it won't take long for her to hear about it too. At that time, she will naturally take the initiative to come look for you. No? Yunche shook his head before saying with a sigh, You don't understand her. She is too cold, and she is used to being lonely and cheerless. She has never wished to have any form of contact with any strangers. Since she is pregnant and had self-abolished her profound art, she will surely avoid inhabited places even more, at all costs, to protect the child. Otherwise, given her unparalleled looks and temperament that can evoke disturbance wherever she goes, how come there would be no news about someone discovering her after leaving frozen Cloud Asgard for so long? Even senior sister Shuarur didn't know about her expulsion from the frozen Cloud Asgard. So she would have definitely gone to some miserable and desolate place similar to frozen Cloud Asgard, where she could remain cut off from the rest of the world. A place where no one would disturb her or harm our child. As such, there would be no way for her to know that I am still alive, and I also don't know where I should go look for her. Someone's coming, Jasmine said all of a sudden. Yunche immediately raised his eyebrows. From the direction of the frozen Cloud Asgard, a white figure was rushing toward him at an extreme rate, and very soon appeared in his line of sight. The figure was actually a huge snow-white bird-type profound beast. It was over 10 meters tall, and its whole body was as white as snow. The features of its body appeared similar to a falcon's, but it was even more robust, mighty, and towering. Its head was similar to that of a hawk, but it was much more noble and lofty. Its claws were like hooks, and its eyes gave the impression of cold blades. It had a great majestic aura, and its speed was even greater, like a lightning. A girl in white dress was riding on its back, and pitch-black hair, like night, hung down to her waist. She seemed like a plum flower in the midst of innumerable mountains and countless snow, presenting purity and holiness along with a glamorous beauty. Chu Li. Yunche's brows slightly wrinkled. He stopped walking, and silently watched Chu Li approach. With its extreme speed, the snow-white profound beast quickly arrived before Yunche in no time. Chu Li twisted her slender waist, shook off the snow, and amidst a faintly cold fragrant wind, she swiftly landed ahead of Yunche like a snow maiden descending to the world, confronting the icy pair of eyes coldly looking at her. Yunche's eyebrows unconsciously raised up, but they immediately relaxed a bit when, let alone killing intent, he didn't even feel any hostility from Chu Li. You can be at ease, as I have not come to cause trouble for you. Right now, I am not your match. Chu Li started talking before Yunche did. Her voice was like a cold water crystal, ice cold and clear. In the beginning, I hated you to the bone because of what happened with my sister, but now, all of a sudden, I don't hate you anymore. Although you did disservice to the frozen Cloud Asgard, trampling my Asgard, destroying my palace gate, and injuring my Asgard mistress, however, doing all that has finally made you worthy of elder sister. You chased me all the way just to say these things to me? Yunche asked. Chu Li lifted up her jade arm, and made a simple gesture. Immediately afterwards, the large, fully snow-white bird moved in a circular motion, and quickly flew down from the sky. Then, it folded its wings and landed obediently beside Chu Li. From its body, Yunche clearly felt the aura of the Sky Profound realm. Could this be a Sky Profound beast? This is a Snow Phoenix beast. A powerful Sky Profound beast that only exists in this snow region of extreme ice. Even in the entire snow region of extreme ice, there are only 3 of them. Although it is a sky-profound beast, its nature is extremely gentle, and is even easier to tame and make it one's contracted profound beast than most of the earth-profound beasts. Chu Li lightly said, even if your current strength is extremely astonishing, due to the limitation of profound power, you aren't capable of flight. There isn't any profound mark of a contracted beast on your hand either, so I'm giving you this Snow Phoenix beast to make it your contracted profound beast. Halfway through Chu Li's talk, Yunche faintly guessed what she wanted to do. The value of a Sky Profound Realm contracted profound beast was no less than a Sky Profound weapon. Even if it was the 4 major sects, they won't have more than 2 or 3 contracted profound beasts at this level. So for Chu Li to be willing to give him something so precious was no different from a gargantuan gift to him. But Yunche didn't give it much thought, and directly shook his head, no need for that. I'm not used to traveling on profound beasts, and going on foot is also a kind of training for me. However, his reaction wasn't at all unexpected to Chu Li, as she coldly said, it's called Little Chan, and the one who caught it live and tamed it was elder sister. Its one and sole owner until now was also elder sister. Yunche suddenly raised his eyebrows. A glint of light flashed past his eyes, showing the wavering of his decision, as he looked at the obedient Snow Phoenix beast. Elder sister severed her contract with it before leaving the frozen Cloud Asgard, and let it stay at frozen Cloud Asgard. It seems she didn't want to be found out due to this Snow Phoenix beast. If you want to go look for elder sister, then bring it along with you. It was born in the snow region of extreme ice, but it can equally adapt to torrid heat and dry weather. In addition, it possesses the 2 attributes of wind and water. Not only can it travel the distance of 1,500 kilometers within a day, it also possesses a powerful offense. Moreover, since elder sister was its first master, it surely has not forgotten her aura even after she had broken off the contract, so it can perhaps help you to find elder sister even faster. After she finished speaking, Chuyueli further added a sentence, me giving it to you is not to help you or anything, but simply for the sake of my elder sister. Yunche's eyes fluctuated for a bit, then he suddenly jumped up and extended his hand. A drop of blood flowed out of his fingertip, and he dropped it between the brows of the snow phoenix beast. The snow phoenix beast spread open its wings, and its mouth released a light cry. Rays of light faintly flickered between its brows, and then, a white-colored contracted profound seal appeared on the back of Yunche's hand, before slowly concealing within his hand. With the help of the contract imprint that Chu Yuchen had left behind, Yunche quickly succeeded in contracting with the snow phoenix beast. The snow phoenix beast let out a long cry, and flew up at low altitude. Then, it landed at Yunche's side. Thanks. Yunche expressed his gratitude with extreme indifference. Chuyueli lightly nodded, and without saying anything else, she floated up in the sky with the intent to leave. What about Qingyu? Why didn't I see her there? Yunche suddenly questioned her. Chuyueli's body stopped in the air, and she said after a little hesitation, 1 year ago, Qingyu passed through the 33rd floor of Ice Purgatory Trial, and became the first person in Myaskar to break through the 30th floor since the past 900 years. Nowadays, she is busy comprehending the divine art under the frozen prison which the ancestor had left behind 1,000 years ago that hasn't been successfully comprehended by anyone before, frozen end divine art. So even I do not know when she will be coming out of the ice purgatory. As you are nominally her husband, and also her great benefactor, if you want to leave a message for her, I can pass it on to her the day she comes out of the ice purgatory. After remaining silent for a while, Yunche slightly shook his head, that won't be necessary. Chuyueli didn't speak any longer. She traveled through the snow and soon disappeared from Yunche's line of sight. Channa, Yunche went over to the snow phoenix beast. He reached out his hand, and gently stroked its icy smooth snow-white wings for a while, before he softly said, this is fine too. Let's go together to look for your mistress. However, from where was he supposed to begin the search? And, how should he look around for her? Looking at the white and boundless field before his eyes, Yunche felt at a loss. He faced toward the north, turned toward the west, then faced toward the south. Finally, his gaze fixed at the east. East. Floating Cloud City. Grandfather, little aunt. The light in Yunche's eyes fiercely trembled. Soon it would be a full 3 whole years since he left Xiao Clan. 3 years. When he was trapped under the sword management terrace, he had thought that he wouldn't be able to fulfill his promise to return in 3 years. But he lived through the predicament, and came out well and safe. His strength was also already enough to never let his grandfather and little aunt be bullied and humiliated by anyone in Floating Cloud City again. The figures of his grandfather and little aunt became increasingly clearer in his mind, and they gradually occupied all of his thoughts. Channa, let's go. The snow phoenix beast let out a long cry. It flapped its wings as it flew up in the air, causing the sky to be filled with ice and snow. Yunche jumped up, and landed on the snow phoenix beast's back. Then, together with the snow phoenix beast, he transformed into a long white figure, and disappeared at the end of the sky within the blink of an eye. As a sky-profound beast, the speed and endurance of the snow phoenix beast was incomparably amazing. When Chuyueli said that it could travel 1,500 kilometers within a day, she wasn't exaggerating in the least. After leaving Heavenly Sword Villa, Yunche had traveled day and night, hurrying to the Blue Wind Imperial City, and disrupted Fen Juecheng's bride escort. He had originally thought of rushing back to Floating Cloud City after staying in the Imperial City for a day, but when he suddenly found out about Chu Yuechan's matter, he had to change his mind and rush to the snow region of extreme ice while burning with anxiety. Now, although Chu Yuechan's matter had left a deep impression on his mind, the land was boundless and he had no clue about the starting point of his search. So the time of when he could meet her again only depended on the wishes of the heavens. With his heart set on speeding home, he traveled day and night like lightning, heading toward the east. According to the distance he remembered, he was getting closer and closer to the incomparably familiar Floating Cloud City. This day, he arrived over the skies of the New Moon City. Even though he had stayed in New Moon City for a very short time, he encountered all kinds of accidents. It was also the New Moon City where he met Kang Yu, and was brought to the Blue Wind Imperial City. Then, right after that, he experienced a series of trials and hardships. It could be said that running into Kang Yu in New Moon City was a huge turning point of his fate. He still remembered that after arriving in New Moon City, he first looked for Seacombe Han in accordance with Xiao Lai's wish to have a place arranged for him to stay. Afterwards, he directly entered the New Moon Profound Palace. But in the end, he only stopped over for only less than 2 days in the New Moon Profound Palace. After thinking about the past events, Yunche put away the Snow Phoenix beast within his contracted Profound Seal, and straight away landed inside the New Moon Profound Palace. Have you heard? Yunche didn't even die that time. He was alive and went back to Blue Wind Imperial City. There he snatched back the Blue Moon Princess during the Burning Heaven Young Master's bride escort, and heavily injured Fen Jueqing. I heard there were a total of 8 Sky Profound experts escorting him, 8 of them, you know. But surprisingly, Yunche had single-handedly beat the hell out of them. The might he showed was practically like that of a completely unrestrained powerful tyrant. Nonsense. Is there even anyone around who doesn't know about it? However, that 8 Sky Profound experts part of your information seems to be wrong. According to what I heard, there were 20 Sky Profound experts accompanying Fen Jueqing, and all of them were one by one pounded down by senior brother Yunche. Then, that usually overbearing Burning Heaven Young Master was directly beaten into an abused dog, and in the end, while showing great mercy, Yunche spared his sorry life. After that, he just dejectedly ran away back to the Burning Heaven clan. Senior brother Yunche is simply the greatest genius of the Blue Wind Empire. When the young man mentioned the 4 words, senior brother Yunche, his eyes released a light of infatuation. Thinking about the fact that he could truly call himself Yunche's younger brother, as Yunche had once stayed in the New Moon Profound Palace, he felt himself so fortunate that he almost passed out. Right after landing on the ground, Yunche made his way to a place where he could hide himself from others, and the first thing he heard were rumors related to him. He still didn't know that because he had once become New Moon Profound Palace's disciple for a brief period of time, the popularity of the New Moon Profound Palace had soared explosively. Its fame had transcended all the other branch Profound Palaces, and was only second to the core Blue Wind Profound Palace. You two are still not heading off to train at this time, what are you chit-chatting here for? A man of just over 20 with dignified features walked over. But facing his chiding, the 2 Profound Palace disciples who were discussing about Yunche wasn't scared at all. They simultaneously let out a heh and said, Instructor Seacombe, we were wrong, please don't get mad, Your Honor, we'll go back to the training room right now. As this person appeared, Yunche slightly froze, because he was actually someone he himself knew. Seacombe Han's son, Seacombe Du, who had given him great help in the Blue Wind Profound Palace back then. HM? Instructor Seacombe? He had said before that he wouldn't remain in the Imperial City after graduating from the Blue Wind Profound Palace and would go back home to New Moon City in order to avoid the Imperial family's chaos. So he really did that, and even became an instructor in New Moon Profound Palace. Even though he was very young and not much older than the Profound Palace's disciples, the current him had already officially stepped into the Spirit Profound realm, and was entirely qualified to be the instructor of these disciples. All right, Instructor Seacombe. I heard that when you were at Blue Wind Profound Palace back then, you had met with Yunche before. Is that true? Seacombe Du's gaze moved, and slightly nodded. His grandfather and my father had an old friendship, so when he first entered the Blue Wind Profound Palace, I voluntarily looked for him, and also tried to give him some help. But thinking about it later, trying to self-righteously help such a peerless genius with my insignificant abilities, really was somewhat naive and laughable. All right, go train already, this place is not for you to chit-chat in. Yes, Instructor Seacombe. The 2 Profound Palace disciples quickly ran away. Seacombe Du, as if thought of something, made a very melancholic sigh. Just as he was about to take a step, a voice suddenly came from his right side, Senior Brother Seacombe, long time no see. Seacombe Du turned his eyes to the right, then turned his entire body around and stared wide-eyed at Yunche who was walking toward him, as he almost couldn't believe his own eyes. Yunche. Why are you here? Sha. Yunche hastily made a shushing gesture, afraid that Seacombe Du's voice would attract others here. He walked closer and said, I didn't think that Senior Brother Seacombe would actually become an instructor at New Moon Profound Palace, it's really surprising. I'm guessing that you ought to be the youngest instructor in New Moon Profound Palace's history. I'm only an intern instructor right now. A part of it is also borrowing my father's convenience. Seacombe Du appraised Yunche from head to toe, the astonishment in his eyes remained for a long time. He laughed self-mockingly, but these little accomplishments of mine simply can't even be mentioned when compared to yours. What Senior Brother Seacombe is saying isn't true. Yunche said sincerely, When I first came to Blue Wind Profound Palace, Brother Seacombe had helped and guided me greatly. Without Brother Seacombe's help, it would be simply impossible for me to settle within the Profound Palace so quickly. These, I have always tightly remembered in my heart. Ha 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 ha. Seacombe laughed candidly, and said with praise, no pretentiousness, no pretense, and no haughtiness. Compared to those geniuses of those great sects nurtured using background and resources, it's unknown just how many times better you are. His gaze swept through the surroundings, and he said, let's get to the main point now. For you to especially come back here, there ought to be something important you need to do, right? As of now, I can be considered as settled here in the New Moon Profound Palace. If it's something regarding New Moon Profound Palace, perhaps I can be of help. Yunche slightly nodded, and said, I did indeed come here for a matter, and need Elder Seacombe's assistance. May I inquire where is he currently? My father. Seacombe stopped for a bit, then said, Father just happened to have gone to the south 2 days ago, and only can return after 3 days at the very least. If it's not something too important, you can tell me and I may be of help. It's not too great of a matter. Yunche did not hesitate, and said, I am currently about to head back to Floating Cloud City, and pick my grandfather and little aunt with me. Xiao Clan is cowardly and heartless, and owes my grandpa and little aunt too much. After my reunion with them, it's not possible for me to let them remain in the Xiao Clan anymore. The Imperial City is currently full of foul air, and adding to all the different forces over there, the situation is complicated. I won't be at ease to settle them down there either, so. Regarding the matter of Yunche and Xiao Clan, Seacombe had heard from Seacombe Han before. He instantly understood, and said while smiling, I had thought it would be something difficult, so it was actually such a simple matter. This matter does not need to go through my father. I can promise here right now, if Uncle Xiao is willing to come here, any of positions up to Vice Palace Chief or Instructor, down to security or just nothing but relaxation, Uncle Xiao can freely choose. In here, absolutely no one would treat him badly. Seacombe laughed and said, besides, with your reputation, to settle your grandfather down at our New Moon Profound Palace, Palace Chief Ju and even the New Moon City's mayor would wish to personally shoulder a carriage to greet him. And perhaps, even Blue Wind Profound Palace would come from afar to grab them. This is not you asking us for help, but is gifting New Moon Profound Palace with a colossal present. Yunche knowingly smiled, and said, all right, then I'll bother Senior Brother Seacombe for this. I will be heading back to Floating Cloud City right now. Be careful on the way. I heard that after you crashed Fen Juecheng and Princess Tsungyue's wedding, and gravely wounded Fen Juecheng, Burning Heaven Clan's people are searching for you everywhere. 1,000-year sect like Burning Heaven Clan had never received such humiliation before. Even though you are already extremely famous and there are a lot of supporters and admirers of you, Burning Heaven Clan would certainly not just let it go. It's best if you can hide your tracks at all times. Seacombe reminded. Yunche made a casual smile, I got it. Everyone all knew that Yunche had crashed Burning Heaven Clan's young clan master's bridal escort, but they did not know that Yunche had counterkilled the 8 Sky Profound Realm experts Burning Heaven Clan had sent to hunt him down. And that even included the Great Elder. Otherwise, Blue Wind Empire would have been even more intensely stirred because of him. Alright, there's something that happened, I don't know would be of help to you or not. Seacombe recalled something, and suddenly spoke, when I returned from sending my father outside New Moon City away a few days ago, I faintly saw a very familiar annoying face. You also know this person, and seem to have conflicted with you before. Who? Yunche questioned. Fen Juecheng. Him. Yunche froze for a bit. Fen Juecheng, Fen Duanhuan's third son. Because he was at odds with Fen Jubi, he left the Burning Heaven Clan and entered Blue Wind Profound Palace, and held number 1 on the Inner Palace's Heavenly Profound rankings. Yet on the day of departure to Heavenly Sword Villa in order to participate in the ranking tournament, he was beaten down by Yunche for angering him. And because of that, he wasn't able to attend the ranking tournament. There were no news of him at all after that. When I left the Blue Wind Profound Palace, from the rumors, it seems that he had returned to Burning Heaven Clan because of Fen Jubi's death, and I didn't pay him attention any longer. That day I took a hurried glance, and it seemed to be him. But he has no reason to appear here, and there aren't any off movements from Burning Heaven's branch clan either. Or perhaps I was just seeing things. Seacombe said hesitatingly. Yunche pondered for a while, then said as he nodded, I understand. Senior Brother Seacombe, thank you for telling me these. We should be meeting again very soon. After exchanging sound transmission imprints with Seekong-du, Yunche left New Moon Profound Palace and rushed straight toward Floating Cloud City riding the Snow Phoenix Beast. As the smallest city of Blue Wind Empire, Floating Cloud City seemed to never have any fate with lively and bustling. When the small city that appeared slightly quiet and old appeared in full view, Yunche's heart uncontrollably jumped with thump, thump sounds. Having lived here for 16 years, how could Yunche not have any emotions toward the small city that carried all his childhood memories? The floating cloud city within his vision became increasingly nearer and bigger. Slowly, he faintly saw Xiao Clan's location, and that dark green-colored rear mountain behind Xiao Clan. A nostalgic emotion rippled within his heart as the silhouettes of two people emerged in his mind with incomparable clarity. The desire to immediately see them was as intense as a flood being held back by a dam. Looking forward, his eyes became faintly misty, and uncontrollable mutters to himself came from his mouth. "Grandpa, little aunt, I'm back. I'm back. I will never let anyone oppress and harm you ever again." As his emotions flooded, he had already arrived above Floating Cloud City's city gates. If he were to continue, the Snow Phoenix Beast would no doubt instigate a huge uproar within the entire city. Yunche put away the Snow Phoenix Beast, landed outside of the city gates, and walked into the familiar yet slightly foreign Floating Cloud City on foot. Unwittingly, 3 years had already passed. These 3 years of experience, thinking from it now, were really like a dream. At first, when he left Floating Cloud City with swallowed hatred, he swore to come back with strength enough to crush Xiao Clan within 3 years, and make the entire Xiao Clan beg his grandfather and little aunt to leave the Reflection Gorge on their knees. And that time, even though he swore it, he clearly knew how difficult it was to achieve it. Thus, he desperately trained and cultivated with all his might, and desperately provoked enemies to enhance himself to the greatest extent. At that time he wouldn't have thought that after 3 years, his strength would become far more than just being able to crush Xiao Clan. The Xiao Clan at this moment, before the level of his current strength, wasn't even qualified for him to spare a straight glance. Walking on Floating Cloud City's ground, Yunche's steps were actually somewhat unsteady. Even though his heart was incomparably eager, his steps were actually not that fast. He was thinking that after meeting Grandpa and little aunt, just how should he hug them, and what should he say to them? Should he laugh, or should he cry? There weren't too few nor too many pedestrians in Floating Cloud City's streets. Everyone walked hurriedly, and there wasn't anyone to notice him. Even if they brushed past his shoulders, there wasn't anyone who would directly discern him as that wastrel and joke who was chased out of Floating Cloud City 3 years ago. Yunche walked through one street after another, as he increasingly neared Xiao Clan. At this time, he stopped his steps, raised his head and looked at the dignified gate before him. 2 huge golden words were engraved on the sign above the gate. Xia Manor. This was Xia Qingyu and Xia Yuanba's home. As a merchant family, Xia Manor would ordinarily always emit a kind of bustling air that carried the smell of commerce. But standing before Xia Manor's gate right now, what Yunche felt was a sort of silence never recorded in his memories. He stood there for a long while, and did not continue forward. Instead, he hid his presence, vaulted high up over the wall, and silently landed within Xia Manor's great courtyard. Episode 43 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.